Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's National Teen Book Club broadcast with me, Sophie and Savitri from the National Teen Book Club team. Thank you so much for joining us for our author Q&A, which will last around 45 minutes.
We're going to start with a quick introduction to our guest speaker and then move on to questions and discussion. Joining us today is Jeffrey Boakye. This is Jeffrey's second time at NTBC, and we're delighted he's giving up his time to speak to book clubbers again. Jeffrey's an ex-teacher turned writer, speaker, broadcaster and educator with expertise in issues surrounding race, masculinity, education and popular culture. Jeffrey taught English in London and Yorkshire for 15 years and now provides training for educational establishments on race, identity, masculinity and education. He has also published 8 books, Senior Teaching Fellow at the University of Manchester Institute for Education and hosts BBC Radio 4's Add to Playlist. He received the honorary degree of Doctor of Letters from the University of Leicester in January 2023.
And Jeffrey's books are on screen now, well, some of them anyway. And Jeffrey has written non-fiction, but also fiction books for children. So what's the link between Jeffrey's book and career and our hero read and its curriculum link? In Romeo and Juliet, despite coming from a wealthy family, Juliet doesn't have status in her own right. And in Cuts Both Ways, Cynthia also feels somewhat powerless in her new life and school. Some of Jeffrey's work deals with the impact on people of not being listened to. That's explored in his discussions about race and masculinity, and we'll be delving into his work in this area and his career more broadly, as well as his reading recommendations in our Q&A. Jeffrey has also taught Shakespeare in schools as well.
We're going to speak to Jeffrey now about his books, his recommended reads and his career, and we'd love for you to put your questions forward. You can submit questions by scanning the QR code on screen now or by typing in the code into slido.com. You could also type them into the Q&A function on this webpage underneath the stream. You can join in with your questions at any time, and please do also let us know via the Q&A function if you're experiencing any issues with the stream so we can try to help.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Jeffrey. Thanks for joining us.
Hello, thank you for having me. What a great welcome. I love people reading off my CV. It makes me feel very proud of myself. Thank you for that.
Well, it's a brilliant one as well. Okay, let's get started on our first question. So we'd love for you to tell us a bit more about your books. It's a big question. So they're mostly nonfiction. As we mentioned, you've also got some children's fiction books. Can you just give us a brief overview of your writing, please?
Definitely. Let's go. I mean, the first thing to say is that most of the writing that I've done in my life has not been published. And that's really important to say, because sometimes people think of writers and they think that you just kind of decide to write a book and then suddenly the thing that you write is out in the world and that's what you do. There's a long, long tail of me writing things that no one ever read, things that I've published for free, things that sit in my notebooks. I've got a collection of notebooks that no one's ever seen, which I wrote because, well, why? Why do you write? I write to explore. I write to organize my thoughts. I write to play with language. I write to be creative. And I've been doing that my whole life, probably. And I'm fortunate enough that writing is something that works for me. So some of you right now will feel like writers, and some of you will have other mediums that you like to use. So writing for me was a way that I could always express myself. I like the way language works. I like rhyme. I like poetry. I like stories. So that's the beginning, right? All that stuff that no one's ever read. In fact, if you look hard enough, there's a bunch of stuff online that no one's ever seen, which I have published for free. Go and find it. It's great. But when my first book was published, I was actually quite old compared to many of the people on the chat right now. I was in my 30s, right? And my first book was coinciding with me being a full-time teacher, starting a family with my wife, basically running out of time. I was a busy person. I was a new dad. I was heading a department. And I thought, if I'm going to do anything with this writing, I need to do it now. Otherwise, I'm going to have no time as my life gets even more complex. So I decided to put all of my joys and passion into a project about music. Now, this is important because if nothing else, you must share your passion with the world. I think that's something which we don't talk about enough. Whatever you're passionate about is the thing that's going to engage other people. And I love music. So my first book, Hold Tight, was about Black music. It was about grime. It was about the legacies of music that contribute to grime, dancehall, UK garage, hip hop, soul, R&B. And it was just a love letter to this thing that I love, music, British music, world music. And what's interesting is that I didn't realize how many insights I had. So to cut to the chase, because there are other questions, the two things that really contribute to my writing are my passions, the thing that I really, really care about, the things I want to think about, even if no one is paying me to do it, and the insights that I've gained along the way, the things that I've learned about life. So all of my books combine those two things, be it Hold Tight, which is about music and culture and the love of all of those things, or Blacklisted, my second book, which is about race, identity, blackness as an ideal, as a concept, history and understanding white supremacy. These things I'm interested in. Non-fiction, then I Heard What You Said, which is about teaching and race. And then we move into other things like Musical Truth, Musical World. Again, music, understanding the world. And then my fiction series, which is 2 books deep, but a third might be on the way, wink, wink. That's about growing up in the 90s. That's about music. That's about family. That's about nostalgia. So what you know and what you love, those are the 2 things that come together when you start writing books. Was that too long an answer? Sorry.
No, that's a great answer.
Okay, good.
You're going to take a different direction because you talked so convincingly there about how important passion is and what a great motivator, even when you're time poor. Do you have any advice for young people? You've been a teacher, you are a teacher, studying something they just don't relate to, don't find interesting, don't feel passionate about?
Yeah, the trick is, all right, and it is a trick, and I'm very good at this trick, is that in any given situation, there's something to latch onto that links back to what you are interested in. All right, let me give you an example. You go to school. School's a nightmare because you get forced to sit through hours of lessons, and some of those lessons you just don't care about. Sorry, teachers, but this is just the way of the world. Those kids might not care that much about the thing that they've been asked to study or think or learn about. Now, teachers do a very good job of trying to make this stuff interesting and accessible and engaging and valuable and relevant. All right, that's what teachers do. That's why teachers exist. But even still, that might not work. So the trick is to find the thing that you are interested in and then apply that to whatever's happening around you. Because if you are interested in something, it's game over for everyone else. Like, you can't not be engaged. So if there's, say, a topic that is thrown at you, say you're studying, I don't know, history, and someone's talking about the Second World War, and you feel like you have no interest in that because you're not interested in geopolitics or the military or what happened socially, there's got to be something that you might love. You might love baking cakes, and then you just ask questions. Were there any cakes in the Second World War? Who was baking them? Was there any flour available in which part of the world? What happened to the flow of sugar when it's interrupted by rationing? And suddenly these questions make it interesting for you. And that's just one example. So in a weird sort of way, center your own passions, because that will keep you interested. And that was the thing that will invite other people to be engaging with you and your work, because that's really the relationship that you're most concerned with, connecting with other people. How's that sound? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that sounds like a really interesting route in. Thank you. Just as you're talking about, trying to access and be interested in certain subjects, how did you feel about Shakespeare at school? That's obviously our curriculum linked to Cuts Both Ways, our hero read.
Yeah.
What was your experience of Shakespeare? And, was it completely different when you were teaching it later in your life as a teacher?
Yeah, it's a great question. I was recently asked by the Guardian newspaper to submit my thoughts as to who's better, Dickens or Shakespeare. It's like dead white male authors. Here we go, head to head. I actually lean towards Shakespeare for a number of reasons. I mean, first of all, as anyone else who's been raised in the British Western education system, Shakespeare is kind of heralded as this great writer. And you're never really told why. You're just told you need to study Shakespeare. And most young people will have come across Shakespeare in some shape, way or form. Maybe not at primary school, but definitely when you get to secondary school. So I'm one of those young people. I was presented with Shakespeare from a very young age. I was always quite good at English, so I was pushed to look at more complex plays when I was quite young, like 12, 13. And I didn't really stop to think what was so good about it. As I got into literature more and studied more about Shakespeare, I realized that the amazing thing about this playwright and poet was the universality of his work. And what I mean by that is you can take the ideas and the characters that Shakespeare builds and you can apply them anywhere. It's always relevant because he doesn't deal with the detail of a particular time and place. He deals with a particular type of person, an archetype. That's the technical term. Say it with me, kids. Archetype. All right. And that's kind of hero, villain, son, daughter, lover, warrior. And he uses these archetypes in a very dramatic way that anyone can relate to. And the way Shakespeare does this is through just the most amazing poetry of language, because he's a poet. So his work is timeless. And you can always learn about the human condition, what it means to be human, through Shakespeare. So the hero read that we're talking about, it's not Shakespeare, but it's doing this thing where you're thinking about relationships, you're thinking about the way that people have to exist in the world, and that's always going to be relevant. So that's what I love about Shakespeare. And the more you study Shakespeare, the more you realize that that's what he was up to, 400 plus years ago.
Thank you. Yes, a mighty legacy, still influencing our curriculum today. What insights and reflections do you want people to take away from your books, Jeffrey?
Oh, all right, here we go. There's like a train track with 2 rails that all of my work runs along. Okay, one rail is the truth. And I'm going to pause before I tell you the other rail, because the truth, well, let me ask you, is the truth a good thing or a bad thing? Like, show someone sitting next to you, use the thumbs up metric. How good or bad is the truth? Is it amazing? Is it terrible? Is it somewhere in between? Is it moving? Yeah, exactly. Like, so you've just done that. This is the thing about the truth, is that it feels like it's a generally good thing, but sometimes the truth can be very disturbing. Sometimes the truth can be incredibly uncomfortable. We're living in a world which is full of very brutal truths that you don't want to often think about. We live in a world of inequality. We live in a world of death, conflict. We live in a world of unfairness. And to wake up and think about those truths might be depressing, but you can't shy away from the truth. And actually what the truth does when you accept it and when you embrace it is it liberates you. So my books always center the truth. That's why Musical Truth has got the word truth in the title, because I'm talking about the reality of white supremacy, of anti-Black racism, of world histories that are incredibly unfair. And I feel like all people, young people especially, need to be given the chance to talk about these truths. But then the other side of the train track has got joy. So you've got truth on one rail, joy on the other. Every day needs to experience joy. Every day needs to feature joy. And I don't just mean like happy, like eat some sugar and watch your best Netflix program. I'm talking about joy, like the joy of being alive. The odds of making it in this world, like the odds of being born, are ridiculous. The fact that we get this chance to share each other, to enjoy nature, to craft things that have a legacy. Right now, everyone in this talk right now has made it this far in their life to be here now. It's a very special thing. Every day, I think, should start with a round of applause, because there's joy in just being. And I like to center that as much as centering the truth. So when you center joy, your work is joyous. It's inviting a hug. It's exciting. It's energized. And when you center the truth, it makes people realize that there are real things being said. And all of my work attempts to center those 2 things, truth and joy. That was a short answer. I should have just said truth and joy, but I gave you the full analogy.
No, we love it. Thank you. And as you spoke about your book, Musical Truth, we've had some questions that relate to that from Albert at Fairfield.
Cool.
He would like to know, do you have a favorite song? And what's your favorite genre of music?
Oh, all right. Hit me with the difficult questions. Thank you. It's so hard to pick a favorite song because it depends on the mood. Like sometimes your favorite food depends on what time of day it is or where you are. In the morning I might want to eat one thing, but if I'm at a party I might want to eat another. So my favorite song, it changes a lot. That said, I do love songs that have affirmations, positive messages in them. And I've got a playlist of songs that I listen to because they tell me positive things that make me think about the world in a positive way, that center the truth and joy that I've talked about, or sometimes just make me feel good about myself. So one of those songs that I always return to is by a rapper you may have never heard of, kids, called Mos Def, Yasin Bey. And he's got a song called Umi Says. It's about the world and being in the world. And this song is very simple. It even starts off saying, I don't want to write this down. I just want to tell you how I feel right now. So he's freestyling and he says, I don't want to take no time to write this down. I just want to tell you how I feel right now. Tomorrow may never come. Oh, this world is never promised. And then he says things like, I ain't no perfect man. I'm just trying to do the best that I can with what it is I have. Amen. That's all of us. None of us are perfect. And you just try and do what you can with what it is you have. And everyone's got a different toolkit. And then he says, I want my people to be free, to be free, to be free. And that's what I want. I want us all to be free from the things that shackle us. Is that too deep? Is that too deep? That's my favorite song. Umi Says by Mos Def. Go listen to it. It's an amazing song.
Jeffrey, we've got so many questions. I'm grouping them in my head in sort of, we've got some questions about your reading, we've got some questions about writing, cool. And we've got some questions about the curriculum, interestingly, which we don't usually get. So thank you for those. So I'm going to start with the reading. St John Bosco Arts College would like to know what books you read as a teen, and I might be able to loop into that. Your favourite books?
Okay. As a teen, this is interesting because I don't know if you know what my vintage is. I'm technically a geriatric millennial. That's what I am, I've been told. So I'm a child of the 80s and 90s. And in the 80s and 90s, you didn't really get books that were aimed at like teen audiences so much. That's quite a recent phenomenon. You had like kids' books, and then you just jumped into adult books. So as a teenager, I was exploring the world of like adult fiction. I was reading stuff that probably I shouldn't have been reading, actually, if I'm being completely honest. Things that were aimed at very adult audiences, but that were really quite challenging in lots of different ways. I did like reading, so teachers would give me lots of classics as well, modern classics, things like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, Catcher in the Rye, just, you know, those kind of modern classics, a lot of American stuff. I did read a lot of that. And then I started to explore Black authors more because I realized that a lot of the authors that I was reading were like white authors, white male authors. And I started to think, I swear that not only white men can write books, I swear that there are other people that can write books as well. So I started to explore other authors, got into people like Toni Morrison, an amazing American author, closer to home, people like Andrea Levy and so on. So that's what I was reading when I was a teenager, but I love comics. Love comics. Love comics. Always loved comics. I'm reading a comic right now. So those are the kind of things that got me going. What I'm reading at the moment is I love reading books about the things I'm interested in, and I'm fascinated in how stories work. So I've got a whole library of books about how stories work, and I can't stop reading these books. Some people find them incredibly boring, but I just find them fascinating. Like, what makes a plot a plot? How does character work? And you can see down there, just in the bottom of that bookshelf, hold on, there, that little shelf there is full of books about how stories work. So those are things that I love. Sorry, I'm not sure if I've answered that question accurately. Tell me if I missed anything and I'll go again.
No, you have answered. Thank you. And we appreciate the detail as well that you're going into with your answers. We had a question that linked to what you just said about the plot of stories. It's coming anonymously. I'm writing a book and I'm struggling to develop the plot. Do you have any advice for writer's block?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. All right. Now, first of all right, seminar time. When you're writing a story, the thing you have to bear in mind is that a story has a shape, and the shape has to stand up. Otherwise, it's not going to be a story. And all I mean by that is there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there's going to be a climax near the middle, and there's going to be a complication at the start. And there'll be some surprises along the way, but let's not worry about that now. Now, without these elements, your story is not a story. And if you think you don't know how to write a story, trust me, you do. The youngest child in the world, if you ask them to tell you a story, they will start with the beginning and go to the middle and then go to the end. And there's a shape which humans naturally return to. Now, once you understand the shape of a story, the craft becomes understanding kind of what your characters are going to do in these different scenarios. So when you've got writer's block, it's often because you don't know what to do next or what to say next. But you're not supposed to know, because the story is not your story. The story is something happening to your characters. So who are your characters? This is the biggest thing. Forget writing an amazing story. Forget the ups and downs and the plot twists and the surprising things. The first question is, who are your characters? Who is your protagonist? And the more you know about your protagonist, the more your story will tell itself. I like to sit down with my protagonist and ask a bunch of questions. You can find these things online, like 50 questions to ask your protagonist. What's the one thing they would save if their house was being destroyed? What do they leave home with every single day? What's their earliest memory? What's the food they like to eat the most? What's the one item of clothing they would never wear? And when you get into that, your character starts to tell you who they are. Then your job, and this is the horrible part, so sorry this person, but this is very cruel, put your character to the test. Make awful things happen to them. Give them difficulties, because that's where the story will start to blossom. And if you don't believe me, think of something awful that could happen to your character and just drop it in, and how would they react or respond? And that becomes your story. And you will be surprised at how they react and respond, because you've never thought about them in that detail. So the real issue is not just how do I write a story, but do I know my character? Because once you do that, you can throw anything at them and the story is going to be incredibly exciting. That's the top tip, that is. Yeah. There's way more that I could say there about archetypes and stuff, but let's not get bogged down.
No, that's brilliant. Thank you. And hopefully that answers a question from Martha about how you get out of a writing slump.
Oh, yeah.
And also addresses Fairfield also wants to know writer's block. Writing
slumps. Listen, you're supposed to have a writing slump. Like this pressure to put pen to paper, if that's happening and you can't write, you walk away from it, because writing actually happens away from the page. I know that sounds odd, but really you need to go and experience life. You need to go and breathe and do things, and that's what you draw upon to do writing. I think it's a bit like I've never done it, but it's a bit like surfing. Anyone surf in the room? Some of you probably nodding. Yeah. Can you surf on a flat lake? No is the answer, because there's no waves. The energy that you need to write is a bit like the wave that comes when you're surfing. You just have to wait for it. The trick is when that wave hits you, you drop everything and you write. Like, forget what you're doing. Like, start writing in your head immediately. When that wave comes, when the idea hits you, when the energy's right, when a scene comes into your head, you have to jump on it, otherwise you miss it. And when there's no waves, great, it's calm. Go and do something else. Go and live your life. Go and spend time with your characters. Then you come back to the page, and then when the wave hits, you're away.
Castle Manor Academy have been waiting very patiently. I think they were the first ones to send us a question.
Oh, what has been a Castle highlight Manor?
Of your... No, so it's not on you, it's on us. What has been a highlight of your career so far, both as a teacher and a writer? And you have a very diverse career, so perhaps you could tell us a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, I do like 5 different jobs, man. It's like, I was a teacher for 16 years, which it's a long time. Teaching years are like dog years. 1 teaching year, 7 dog years. I always say that because it's very true. So I was teaching English for 16 years. Now I lecture at university. I teach teachers on a PGCE course. I do add to playlists, radio show. I write books, journalists from time to time, and I visit schools talking about curriculum, talking about lots of different issues that schools are facing. Highlight of my career is, I think, in terms of writing, it's just such a special thing to finish a project and put it out into the world. I think that's a highlight every single time. It's an incredibly vulnerable thing. And the first time it happens, it's just the most exciting thing ever to think I've written something and other people get to read it. So I'll just say very humbly that being published is an incredible privilege and highlight that doesn't get old. I've got to meet lots of very fascinating people because I do lots of interviews and panels and talk to people, and I'm on stage a lot. So I've met many people that I admire greatly. People like Michael Rosen, who I can now call Michael, like because I speak with him, and people like the rapper Akala, who I interviewed, and Gary Young, a journalist, and Nova Reed, and just so many people who I admire who do what I do and do it in different ways. So that's just a huge privilege. So yeah, I think that those are the highlights: connecting with people, be it audiences or other creatives. Love it.
And you spoke about having multiple jobs there. We had a question from Martha who would like to know, is writing a sustainable job to have income from?
No. Next question. Just kidding. Right. For me personally at the moment, no, it's not. It's very interesting because I'm a very good writer. I'm not just saying that to big myself up. You need to know when you're good at something, kids. And I write really well because I put a lot of time into it. It's not just talent, it's hard work, the craft. I'm serious about. My books are great and I'm writing more than anyone else. I don't know. Show yourself if you've written as many books as me in the past 8 years. I don't think you have. Like, I might be one of the most prolific. And even still, I cannot make a living off my writing, which is fascinating to me. Now, why is that? Well, first of all, remember my 2 train tracks? I write about the truth. People don't like hearing about the truth. Can I really write books about white supremacy and racism and misogyny and homophobia? Musical World talks about everything from Islamophobia and anti-Semitism to the AIDS pandemic of the 1980s and the homophobia that was surrounding that. I mean, these are heavy issues whilst also centering joy. And I feel like when things are difficult, quote unquote, difficult conversations, people shy away from them. So that might be a reason that my books don't always find commercial success. In terms of writing though, in terms of like how I can continue to do it, well, I've got other jobs that bring me money. But the writing itself, it's kind of like, it's almost like I'm not doing it for the money. The first book I wrote was published by an independent press called Influx, and Influx were very small. They don't have a lot of money. They couldn't do a large publication run. And so that book was kind of put out there quite cheaply. And I got paid an advance of £1,000 for that book. Now that book was about 2.5 years work. And it was my life's long passion. And I got £1,000 for it. Is that a lot of money? I don't know. It kind of is, but it kind of isn't. You can't live off it. You then only get money in terms of profit once you earn over £1,000 of sales. So I have earned more than £1,000 of sales for Hold Tight. That was my first book. But how much in royalties do you think I got paid last year for sales of Hold Tight? Drum roll, please. £24 last year. There you go. So I got £24 last year for Hold Tight after earning through the advance of £1,000. Now, my question to you actually is, would you carry on writing? Would you keep on doing it? Like that's a genuine question. Because I can't live off £1,024. But I'm not doing it for the money. So I did write another book, and that advance for Blacklisted, my second book, was £10,000. Is that a lot of money? Maybe, maybe not. I haven't earned through the advance £10,000, despite the fact that Blacklisted is a very popular book. But it talks about racism. It's a bit uncomfortable for people. So should I stop there? My next adult book was I Heard What You Said. That advance, should we talk money? I'm just like giving you everything. All right, cool. I'll carry on. That advance, drum roll, please, for I Heard What You Said. £100,000. What do you reckon? Is that a lot of money? Yeah, it's quite a lot of money. Can you live off it for a year? Yeah, definitely. 5 years. And that's the thing. My agent takes 15% of everything. So that's gone. Bye-bye. Taxman takes their cut. Okay. And then you get paid in installments. And the problem here is that if I don't earn through that £100,000 and start making profit, everyone in the industry is going to look at that and go, oh, does Jeffrey's book sell? So will they give me more money for my next book? It might be the reason that I write so many books, because I'm just doing so many different angles. So to answer your question, writing in itself, for me personally, I found it quite difficult to sustain myself through writing, but I'm building something bigger than money at the moment. I'm building a legacy of work. These books are going to withstand the test of time. Eventually, people are going to have to take notice, like your good selves. And I'm sort of confident that I'm doing it for the right reasons. And actually, in life, money follows passion and integrity. Chasing money is not the way to go in life. You need to chase your passion, your integrity, connecting with people, truth and joy, and then the money will fall into place afterwards. I think. Maybe. Hopefully. Definitely.
Thanks for Jeffrey. And hopefully that sort of answers a couple of questions we had from Martha at Fairfield around your motivation, and Jenny was interested in whether writing is a career you can rely on. So it sounds like I think you've probably covered both of those. Just before I ask the next question, because it seems a great point to segue into the questions about curriculum and what we should be reading or what we should be exposed to or have the opportunity to be exposed to maybe. Could you just explain for us advanced and earn through for anybody who didn't?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah. So an advance is a sum of money which is given to you. It can be given before you finish writing the book, or it can be given on completion of actually finishing the manuscript. And it's money which is given to you, which you get to keep. And it's got nothing to do with the sales. Earned through means once the book is on sale, the profit from those sales has to then match the advance. And then you start making a bit of money on profit after you've reached that figure. So if you get paid in advance of £1,000, that's yours to keep. Yay. And then the sales of the book have to get to £1,000. And then any profit, you get a percentage of that profit on top of your advance. So that's how that works. It's an interesting system because for most writers, particularly marginalized writers, I'm connected with an amazing organization called Inclusive Books for Children, and the IBC focuses on inclusive books from a diverse range of marginalized authors, be it by racially marginalized or disability or a whole range of marginalized identity features. A lot of marginalized authors struggle to earn because their books don't make it onto the shelves. And that's one of the reasons that I think our publishing industry needs to think a little bit harder about who it's supporting, because these narratives are so important. We need a diverse range of perspectives. Yeah, sorry, I just gave you two answers to one question.
No, that is in fact the next question we were moving on to. Fairfield School were interested to know if you think your book or any of your books deserve to be in the curriculum. And we had a similar question. What books do you think should be in the curriculum or the literary canon to represent diversity and advance knowledge in literature?
Two answers. First of all, my books 100% needs to be on the curriculum. My goodness, that's why I write them. Musical Truth is a curriculum in a box. Musical World is a curriculum in a box. I mean, this is a song by song analysis of some of the biggest conversations that we as a species are having. All right. If that doesn't need to be on the curriculum, I don't know what should be. So anyone listening who's got connections with like making things happen in that front, email me. Let's talk business. All right. The less glib answer is we need perspectives. The problem with the world at the moment is that it centers power, and there are certain identity features that are more powerful in this world right now than others. So if you're a man in the patriarchy, that means a world designed by men for the benefit of men, then you've got social power. I'm a man, I have social power. There are certain privileges that I have. If you are English speaking in an English speaking country, you have power. If you're not disabled, you have power. If you're white in the West, you have power, and so on and so forth. Now, these powerful identities are often what we call centered narratives. They're the narratives that are centered, which is why a lot of the books that I studied at school were written by white, Western, straight, non-disabled men, because those identities are powerful. Is that making sense? Great. The problem with having one perspective is that it means that you don't see the bigger picture. You don't understand what the world is like from different perspectives. Now, for me, as a Black person living in a legacy of systemic and institutional racism and white supremacy rules that go back to the 1600s, I've got a perspective on the world, and I'm also the child of immigrants. I've got a perspective on the world that someone who is centered as white and British might not have. And those perspectives illuminate more of the picture. We need all of these perspectives. That's why that I spend a lot of time talking about sexuality, gender, disability, things that don't seem to affect me, because I need a wider perspective. And our stories, they're supposed to give us a wider perspective. So the curriculum should be diverse, not just to say, oh, look, we've got a bit of everything, but because the more perspective you have, the richer the conversation is, and the more you can grow. That's the point of a good curriculum. So yeah, so I think that's probably my manifesto for what the curriculum needs to look and sound like. and everyone has a perspective on the world which is a little bit different to everyone else, which is why that your story, I'm talking to every single person in the chat right now, your story is important because your perspective on the world is different to other people's, and that needs to be celebrated and recognized. There you go.
Thank you. We had a question from Joseph who wanted to know, how did you get into writing your book originally? And then how has it kind of led to all those other opportunities? Have you put yourself out there? Have you had people asking you about those?
Yeah.
And you talk to us about how that's kind of opened up doors for you.
Amazing. First things first, there was a real sense of urgency. I sat down in 2016 and grime, which is a genre of music, like if you've heard of Stormzy, you know what grime is. It was really starting to get popular in the mainstream, and I realized no one was writing about grime in a way that I thought it needed to be written about. Lesson number one, if you spot something, if there's a book or a story out there which no one else is telling and you know it, then that's your book. And so I wrote the book because I realized that I had a perspective on grime that I just wasn't seeing elsewhere. Okay, so I started to write my book in chapters, and I realized straight away that it was going to be a book. And I realized straight away I could probably sell this. But then the most important thing that I did then was to actually share with other people. And that might seem counterintuitive because sometimes you're told to be very like secretive. We live in a world that's very competitive. Like you're going to sit a bunch of exams, kids, and it's you versus 600,000 other kids in total silence. Who gets the best grade? And if you get a good grade, then you've got a better qualification. That's not how the world really works. We're communities. So I took my book and I shared it with my friends who also cared about what I cared about. And it just so happened that one of my friends at the time, someone that I'd met on social media, can you imagine that, making a friend on social media? It's never happened before or since. It was the first time. And I shared this with my friend, Darren Chetty, and he knew a man called Kit Kalis, who just happened to own a publishing house called Influx Press. And he said, I think Kit would like to read this. So that's lesson number 2. Connect. There are people out there that love what you love. There are people out there that know what you know. There are people out there that care about what you care about. And if I hadn't connected with Darren and then he connected with Kit, I don't know how I would have got Hold Tight published because I didn't know anyone in publishing. And I still don't know how to get a book published. That just set in motion a series of events that led to me being a published author with an agent and, you know, able to lean on those relationships. So yeah, those are two big lessons. Write about what you know, value your own insights, even if no one else can see them, because no one else knows what you know, and then lean on your connections, make friends, make those communities happen. Yeah.
You've obviously got, you know, as you said, you're in contact with other writers. Are there books, YA or otherwise, that you could recommend to teenagers? Martha did ask this. But yeah, more broad, so not necessarily YA, but something you recommend to teenagers.
No, definitely. Listen, there's a book which I think is out at the moment by Ashley Hickson Lovance. Ashley Hickson Lovance, and it's called Wild East. And he sent that to me maybe last year before it was published, because that's what happens. You get sent books all the time, and it's beautiful. It's a book about a young lad. He's about 14, and he moves out of London and he goes to East Anglia, I think, or like Norwich or somewhere. And it's about his journey through his own life, but realizing that he is a writer and he doesn't feel like a writer. And it's written in a kind of slightly poetic prose. And it's also about writing as well as about the problems that he's going through. And it's very, very realistic to what it feels like to be 14. And I just fell in love with this book, man. I was just like, it was so beautifully written. And so it kind of felt refreshing and calm, but at the same time, very honest about the issues that young people are facing. So Wild East by Ashley Hickson Lovance is just it's a top recommendation for like a YA experience, which I know people are going to love. Yeah. Really, really like that one.
Wild East was a featured book for Book Club last year. So it was a brilliant book. And we also had Ashley come and do a Q&A, and he's very inspirational.
He's a good guy. Yeah. Really, really, really special. Yeah. Special talent.
And we've probably got time for a couple more questions. We are nearing the end of our Q&A, and we have
Let's
a
go.
question from Joseph. I'm not sure how old he is. Joseph has asked, do you think someone our age could publish something? So a teenager.
Oh gosh, yeah, 100%. I mean, this is one of the issues with what I said before about power. Remember that? This is one of the issues, that young people are often disempowered. Young people are told that they haven't got social power because they aren't making money, because they're not politically powerful, because they're inexperienced and all this other stuff. Absolute nonsense. If you look throughout history, in terms of social cultures, developments, the way that society evolves, it often starts with youthful energy. It often starts with young people pushing back against something. One of the biggest examples you can think of comes with popular music. So if you go back to like the 1940s, that was the birth of the teenager. Like, people don't often think about this, but I'm a nerd, so I researched this stuff. Before the 1940s, the teenager was not really a concept that meant anything. The word had been used from like the 1920s, but in the 1940s, they decided that young people had a particular spending power. They would spend their money on different things than adults and children. And that's the birth of the teenager. And since then, teens have dictated what is cool, and therefore dictated what you spend your money on. In white America, rock and roll became cool. That's Black American music. If you go back far enough, it's the blues. If you go back further than that, it's transatlantic slavery. Go back further than that, it's Africa. So young people were connecting with something that adults were not interested in, and rock and roll changed the world. Skip to the 1970s, hip hop. Again, this is young people, Black and brown, Latin, Puerto Rican, African American communities in poor parts of the world, creating a whole culture that took over the world, because now hip hop is everywhere. If you wear trainers and you think trainers are cool, that's because of hip hop. If you wear sportswear and you think that's cool, hip hop. If you like rapping, hip hop. If you listen to UK drill, hip hop. I could keep going. If you heard of Drake and Kendrick Lamar, hip hop. Bling bling, hip hop. Shall I stop? It's all hip hop, right? So that was a youth culture, and youth culture is one of the most powerful things. So never think that young people don't have social power, because you decide what's cool, how we talk, how we dress, and your perspective on the world is supposed to push back against adults. Adults are trying to keep the world the same, but real talk, adults were kids at one point and they kicked back too. So your job is to share your story. So yeah, you got more power than you realize.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I think we are coming to the end. So our final question, I think, is, do you have any advice for young people or your younger self around achievements or success? So you've given us loads of great advice, but what tips do you have for creating a career success story?
Yeah, I think, first of all, it's very important to value your insights. And what do I mean by that? All I mean is, every single person is going through the world and experiencing the world in a unique way. So no one knows the world in the way you know the world. And we're all learning things about the world, because even if you're the same, say you're born and you're the exact same as your older sibling, same parents, same household, same carers, same clothes, you're not the exact same, because you're a different age and you're having different experiences. So those differences mean that your experiences and perspectives are valuable. If you value those insights and you gather those insights, your value in the world is just going to become sharper and sharper to you. That's the only thing that I lean on, is that I've got insights that I try to build upon. And the other thing to say is that the thing that makes you unpowerful is probably the thing that's your secret superpower. Because I know we need to go, but I've got a stutter, and no one ever believes me when I say that. One of my characters in the Kofi series is Kelvin. He has a stutter, and that's because I have a stutter. And that means that as a child, I really struggled to talk to people. I really struggled to present things. Reading out loud, forget it. But now I do radio and all this. I've just talked to you for 45 minutes. Listen to me, motor mouth. But what it was my stutter actually, it forced me to think about words more than the average person. It's why I like writing, because I can write fluently in a way that I couldn't speak fluently. So I became a poet. So my secret superpower became words. And then I learned that when I talked with passion and with insight and from the heart and with joy, I didn't stutter so much. which is why I talk like this. It's not an accident. So if you've got something about you that's a bit different or makes you feel a bit small or weak, learn how to flip it in just the right way, and it's probably going to be your secret superpower. That's the most inspirational thing that I can say to you, but it's also very true.
Thank you so much, Jeffrey. That is unfortunately all we do have time for today. I know there's a few questions that came in right at the last minute, but we are going to have to let Jeffrey go, and you're all going to have to get back about your school days. But thank you so much for your time. So many books, if people are interested in follow-up, that there's bound to be something for everybody to take a look at. But yeah, thank you so much for those insights.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure, and yeah, great to connect.
Thank you, Jeffrey, and I hope you all enjoyed the Q&A with him there. I know we're short of time, so I won't do my usual spiel at the end, but recordings are available. So it will be available after the session. Please join us for our next sessions. We hope to see you next week, and then the following week for our final book club session with the author of Cuts Both Ways, Candice Brathwaite. Oh, and just a reminder as well that a bonus for joining us for this term, you will be entered into a draw to win a bundle of books. We're very excited about that and hope you are too. We'll hope to see you soon. Thanks everyone for joining us today. Bye everyone.